Hey, this is 15 questions for level designers to ask themselves. I'll run through these quite quickly so you can see which ones feel relevant to you. Question number 1 is, why is this interesting? Whether it's a particular part of the level you're working on or the idea for the level as a whole, this is one of the first things that I think you should try and figure out. Because if you don't have a clear idea of why the thing you're making is supposed to be interesting, then you're not in a very good position to design with any clarity or purpose. It could be about introducing a new game mechanic, or maybe combining two mechanics that haven't been used in this way before, conveying a certain story beat, or maybe just a particular kind of atmosphere. Whatever it is, you need to design with a specific intention in mind, which you can then focus your attention on and the player's attention on. Question number 2 is it clear to the players why this is interesting? Let's say you've got a clear sense of what you're trying to make. One way to figure out where to start or how to improve something is to think about it through the lens of how can I make it clear to players why this idea is interesting. And this can be a useful question to ask players after a playtest. Did you think this situation was interesting and why? Question number 3 is, what is this game really about? As I've said in a bunch of these videos, good level design is different for every game. Whatever you're working on, you need to understand and express what is uniquely interesting about this game in particular, and you should try and focus on this as much as you can. I think a lot of the best level design out there is essentially a showcase for things that you can only do in this game. And at the very least, it can be a good starting point for when you're generating ideas. Question 4. What kind of spaces work best for this game? Remember that realistic spaces are often not the same thing as spaces that are good for gameplay. Also, don't fall into the trap of just designing for the genre, because even games in the same genre are often ideally suited to very different kinds of spaces. Uncharted, Max Payne 3 and Gears of War might all be AAA third-person action games with a cover system, but the spaces that work for those games are all different. The same can be said of AAA stealth games like Dishonored, Hitman and Metal Gear Solid. Regardless of genre, spaces are always designed specifically for unique mechanics and a specific intended experience. Question 5. Is this level or area bigger than it needs to be? I think it's one of the most common problems with layouts from either inexperienced level designers or layouts that need a lot more work. It's really easy just to make things way too big. I think this is often because people like the idea of huge, epic environments, and also because large spaces seem to imply more choice for the player. But neither of these things are an excuse to make things too big. If you make spaces too big, you're often creating more work for yourself and the artist. Spaces can suddenly feel very empty and characters very small, and both the player's attention and your attention will be less focused on what really matters. So make sure to keep an eye on this. Question 6. Is my level needlessly flat? If your game is a 3D game, then approaching a space from either below or above can be a really simple way of transforming how it feels. Making really flat levels by accident can be a side effect of designing top-down on paper, so be wary of this if that's what you're doing. Question 7 is, am I just doing this because it's what games usually do? To be honest, I think a lot of games and levels fall into this trap, and the solution lies in what we talked about with question 1, which is having a good answer for why is this actually interesting? Your answer to that question probably isn't because this is what games usually do. 8. Should I get feedback on this now? Don't wait too long and put hours and days and weeks of work into polishing something when you haven't got feedback and you don't know if it's even worth polishing. Yes, to some degree you always need to present things nicely enough that the ideas come across well, but be careful about polishing things too much too early and ultimately wasting time. 9. Is the thing I'm doing right now really necessary? Because if it's not, maybe you should be doing something else. Number 10. Is this how players will actually play and feel about it? Remember that even if you've made something that feels cool when you play it, it's the experiences of all your players that actually counts. Playtest things when you can, and remember that your own experience of your own levels is always very biased and tainted. 11. Are the different parts of my level and the different beats of the experience distinct? You never want your level just to feel like a bunch of stuff. Stories have specific narrative beats and a beginning, a middle, and an end. Meaningful journeys finish in a different place to where they started. And good pacing and composition of any kind is about composing distinct elements, moments, and feelings that combine and contrast with each other in interesting ways. 12. Are there any interesting surprises? Be conscious of making things that just kind of play out as you'd expect them to. Whether it's gameplay or story stuff we're talking about, A lot of the most memorable moments come from interesting surprises. And this doesn't mean that you need huge twists all the time, you just don't want to go too long without anything actually interesting happening. 13. If we're being honest, is this idea a bit of a lame cliche? I think lots of games are full of cliches and we don't really need any more of them. Even when you have to work within certain conventions, formulas or tropes, try to find a way to put a twist on them that is interesting and specific to what your game is about. 14. What is this level in relation to the other levels in the game? Never think of your levels as just more content. Think about how they complement and contrast with the other levels and add to the experience and the ideas of the game as a whole. And finally, 15. Is this level or gameplay intrinsically interesting? In case you're not familiar with the terms, when something is intrinsically rewarding, it means that we do it because we just enjoy doing it. Whereas extrinsically rewarding things are things that are not very fun, but we do them because they have some kind of external reward attached to them. I'm personally really against making levels and gameplay that asks the player to do really quite boring or meaningless things just in order to level up or get experience points or make the gameplay longer. When I interviewed with Us2 Games to work on Alba, which is the game in the background now, I was really happy that they felt the same way about this, and I think it shows in the final game. We tried to make sure that everything in Alba was intrinsically fun and rewarding, while relying on meaningless extrinsic rewards as little as possible. I think it's important to respect players' time and make things that are interesting to play simply because they're interesting. Okay, let's wrap this up before I get too preachy. That was 15 questions for level designers to ask themselves. If you found this video useful, then it would be great if you could press the like button and keep an eye out for another 15 questions coming soon. Cheers for watching.